What's up, guys? Welcome back to Keeping Up with the X-Men. We are still bombing through these True Believer books, and today is going to be Phoenix Presents Cyclops and Marvel Girl. This was part of the X-Men featuring Cyclops and Marvel Girl. This is the 48th issue that was launched in September. This is, if I remember right, what was going on here was this was after the death, quote unquote, of Charles Xavier, and all the X-Men were told to disband. They kind of went, some of them went over here, some of them went over here, and the X-Men books kind of went weird for a while, where like one book would be about what Scott and Jean were doing, and then the next book might be about what Beast and Bobby are doing, and the next book might tell you what Angel is doing, and that's kind of the way the books went for a little while there, and this is basically from that era. Now, each one of these X-Men had to go out and find a type of cover story. They were still going to be X-Men, but they were going to work somewhat under the radar like superheroes. And I get it, it's a superhero comic, but I feel like this era of the X-Men was a little challenged because it didn't fit. This is an era where Jean Grey is posing, and that's what she's doing. She's posing. This isn't something she actually wants to do or cares about. She's working as a model. And while this is nice because I get to see her in a bunch of bikinis and things like that, it doesn't really fit with who she is. But I will say this, it does fit with the story because even she kind of admits this is just something that she's doing because. That's it. There's no actual reason for this. And Scott is posing as a disc jockey and a jealous boyfriend of a new up-and-rising model. And that's kind of what's going on here. But it does give us kind of a nice spread. It shows some real nice fashion shots, basically. I guess you'd call them pinups or whatever. Basic fanfare type stuff that was put into a lot of these comics. You've seen it with Mary Jane and whatnot all the time. But anyways, she's there. She's doing a photo shoot for a swimsuit, I guess, calendar or photo album or magazine or something. It's fairly vague. And during that time, Scott walks in, he sees what's going on, and there's some guy offering her a gig, and Scott comes in, he's going to punch the guy in the face, and then she takes him away, and then they make your standard bimbo rhetoric of comic books at the time where the other women are like, ooh, I like that Scott guy, and then she's like, he's taken, and just that dumb crap. Well, at the exact same time, there's some giant machine thing called Computo that's making robots because comic books. It was a different time, guys. This was a time when you could get away with not necessarily that all stories at this point in time were like bad, but there was a level of we believed easier. I don't know what else to say. It was we let stuff go easier. Nowadays, you see things where like something will come out and people won't agree with it, and they'll cry and whine and cry over and over and over again about every little detail in a comic. And back then, we were willing to let crap like this go. Robot, because modeling, because Scott's a disc jockey because he didn't have no communications degree. He never went through the actual intern programs or anything like that. He's just on the radio because he's Scott Summers. I don't know how that added to his credibility, but he's on the radio and we let it go. We didn't question everything. We just did it. In fact, he goes to the radio station and he tells her, I'm doing a political radio show. So he's talking about all different kinds of things like the mayor and different stuff like that on the radio show. And he tells her that it's all pre-recorded so he could do this in the morning. And then they have the whole afternoon to be X-Men, I guess. And when the show is aired, they're basically lying and claiming that it's a live broadcast type of thing, so he always has a type of alibi. Well, there are a couple of guys unloading boxes for equipment that's going to go to the radio station, and then robots come out to steal the equipment because robots. Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They talk about it's this piece of machinery is able to spend like 50,000. This piece of machinery will give us 50,000 watts, and then right after that, it basically says these robots are going to go take that because I don't know why. Whatever. Comic books. So anyways, Scott and Jean run out there in full costume. They start zarking, and which I always say browp because that's my word. I don't know why it's always zark or crack or whatever. But anyways, he fires some optic blasts, and then she does some kinetic shields, and then this one robot gets fat so that he can like body slam or belly flop Scott. And then Scott shoots the robot, and it blows up because she holds the robot in place so he doesn't fall on Scott. And then Scott shoots it, and it blows up. And it's a comic book of its time, guys. Fat robot is dead, and the other robot that first tried to attack him was not successful, and they flew away. Jean and Scott track the robots out to this abandoned area, Apex Sand and Gravel Company Incorporated, and for whatever reason, they decide that they're going to go down there and figure out what's going on. So he blasts his way down the tunnels, and then we see that Computo tells what is it? These robots have dumb names like 19B. And 19B admits that he failed, and because of that, he is told that he will be canceled. So they throw him into a bunch of gears to dismantle him, and then they will use his pieces to create a robot that's not such a failure. Yeah. So then Scott and Jean run out. There's a confrontation. That's about the most of it. She crushes a couple of them like cans. He fires some browns. And then, because reasons, you figure out that Quasimodo was behind all this. And he runs over and pulls a switch. And then he goes through some hole, like a trap door or whatever. And as he runs away, the place fills with water, and Jean Grey uses her telekinetic powers to fly them out. And that was that issue. It was a different time, guys. Some of these older books, and I don't get a chance to talk about these older books that often. I really don't. It's not often that I get a chance to come in here. But I figured that from now on, as I pick up these True Believer books and as I read into backlogs and things like that, there's no reason not to come in here and drop conversation pieces. I'm starting to figure out that keeping up with the X-Men is going to be a massive project, and we're not always going to be 100% up to date. So I'm just going to keep dropping reviews and talking about X-Men as much as I possibly can, and we'll stay as up to date as we can. When I get good days, I'll catch us up on an entire backlog of something. Like the next backlog to catch up on in this stack is All New Wolverine. We'll just cut through every book all the way up to the part where we're at. And I'm actually in debate to change the way that the format of this show works, where I'm thinking that maybe I might start doing something where each week, like on Friday, I come in here and I might drop like an hour and a half long episode, almost like a podcast, where I could just talk about every book that I can get out of the way in rapid fire. But I might not, because the single episodes, sometimes that's easier to digest. And I'm debating different possibilities. This is a massive work in progress. It is a huge undertaking, and the Twitter is growing, and the Facebook group is growing, and the Facebook page is growing. So there's people that are starting to talk to me, and and whatnot, and I'm doing, like, when I don't have the ability to come in and do these type of recordings, I've been doing 20 drops, where I just take 20 pictures from my massive, ridiculous backlog of X-Men pictures that I've got, and I just throw them up. Jean Grey's, Wolverine's, team pics, issue pictures, and things like that. Just all kinds of stuff that I've collected. The end of this book is one of those things where they try to introduce you to a character, and this one was Marvel Girl. And these are pretty cool sometimes, but basically what this one does is she says that she can move things from far distance, but it's easier if she's closer. She showcases that she can peel apples like no other woman, and that her mutant power gives her an edge in making apple pie. She then goes on to explain that she can do housework real easy, even lifting the chair. Then finally it goes on to something that actually matters, stuff that we actually care about when it comes to her powers. She says that most bindings cannot hold her. She can either telekinetically unbind herself or use whatever is around to cut the bindings. Even super strong enemies that throw really heavy hammers, rocks, mallets, cars, she has deflection tricks. She can unlock most locks telekinetically, so she's usually not trapped in any room, such as if she was actually thrown into a prison cell, she would just unlock the door and walk out. And she even shows that she can form shields of protection, so she can survive even jumping through raging fires that are coming from, she says literally, I don't usually go into this, but I can perform volcano hopping. So she can sit in there just running. It's not like, she can survive massive forms of heat and everything, and that works real well. She explains that she can't necessarily fly, but she can use her powers to levitate herself way, way high up and float. So she can maintain whatever altitude she wants after she's positioned herself up there, and she can lower herself down gently. It's all telekinetic. It's not actually that she has the power to fly. She's kind of lifting herself. And she even goes into pretty much any wall ever built, I can go over it. She talks about how most enemies that are stronger than her are still not a problem because she can telekinetically shock their minds and stop them before... She can telepathically shock their minds, and that gets rid of them, takes them off the battlefield. So she doesn't have to outpower you. Most people don't have psychic guards. She can shut you down before the fight ever begins. And she also talks about her powers are pretty easy to hide. So, like, she foils this guy that's stealing a purse. She, like, knocks over a trash can into his way. He trips over it, and she makes it look like the bag flew out of his hands and went back to the lady that he'd stole it from. And then she makes a comment, and that part was nice. And then at the end she makes this comment, she's like, I also seem to have the power to turn men's heads without trying. It's true that Jean Grey is super pretty, and she's a very beautiful woman, but sometimes it's ridiculous. And you know me. You know that there's something about it, about the way that characters are portrayed. I'm not against sex appeal in comic books. Like, I'd have no problem with the beginning of the issue having the fact that she was a model and they got an excuse to kind of show us swimsuits and show off just how attractive she really was. Whatever. You want an excuse for characters to go swimming so that Scott can wear trunks and show off his permaflex? You want an excuse for characters to be models and show off how wonderful they look or whatever? It's fine. It's a fantasy setting, guys. It's not real. But I do have to kind of laugh when I read comics from the past and I stumble upon little things like that. Like, I can bake a pie like any other. Like, I have an advantage over other women making pies because I have super... It's so dumb. And that little last line there where she was like, I also seem to have the power to turn men's heads. It was a different time. It really was. I can't was whatever. So guys, for the night, you're all caught up with X-Men later on.